I can tell you one thing. Technology is the single most important aspect of every business that has successfully scaled.
It's time for that Real Estate Tech Guide. It's your weekly chance to explore how technology can help your real estate business explode. Each week, you'll hear from real estate investors who have been there and done that and find out their favorite technology tips. Listen in as Jordan speaks with tech companies and learns about new technologies and new ideas that will help you scale your business. And now, join your host, Jordan Samuel Fleming, CEO of Smartphone, for this week's episode.
Hey, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of the That Real Estate Tech Guy podcast. I'm your host, Jordan Fleming, and my co-pilot for this episode is Scott Corbett from Lightmark Media. I'm excited to speak to him. He's an old friend of mine. Scott, welcome to the podcast, and why don't you give a little introduction to yourself and the company?
Hey, it's so great to be here, Jordan. Great to see you again. I love the idea of this podcast. Much needed. So glad you're leading the charge on this one, because it's more and more like the technology aspect of lead generation, and the whole real estate investing business is critical. So good for you. Yeah, what we do, we help real estate investors around the country in their local markets generate leads, mostly off-market deals, what people call motivated seller leads, right? So we've been doing this a long time, over 10 years, and we use Google ads, Facebook ads, Instagram, YouTube, even getting into TikTok ads a little bit. So we help people do that. We also help with marketing automation and systems and things on the back end, so they actually get the most value out of the leads. But mostly it's people who know us for lead gen.
Yeah, and I'm really excited to have you on today because obviously, I've seen you guys work over the past years, directly both for clients of mine and in fact myself at times, so I know the kind of experience you guys bring to this game, particularly for the real estate investors. You've got such a wealth of experience, and lead gen, aside from the follow-up to lead gen, which is actually following up and doing it properly, right, getting proper leads is where you're going to spend the most amount of your money, probably, as an investor. Yep. Particularly when you're starting out, and I think it's a bit of a minefield. So, can you kind of walk us through how you approach it as a company, how you'd approach a new customer, maybe the things you'd want to know, just so we can give people a bit more of an understanding as to what the fuck it means?
Yeah. I'll do my best. So we have investors who come to us all the time, and they're at various stages of their development as a company, or, sometimes it's just a solo guy. But where most people start out, they really and this has changed completely. Not so long ago, the place people tended to start out was in direct mail. And now, and people still do direct mail, don't get me wrong. It's just that it tends to be on the more expensive side, and it involves several moving parts that I think intimidate people at times. But where people start typically today is by doing text message, outbound text messaging, and cold calling, right? And of course, they use tools like smartphone very effectively for parts of that. And that is what I would call like a relatively high impact, although there are, of course, technical challenges with those two methods of, for various reasons. It's high impact, but relatively low cost, right? And people love it for that reason. And so where people go next is kind of where we get involved. And the places people go next are generally one of two places. They go to Facebook ads, which are, I don't need to state the obvious here, right? But it's just a way. A Facebook ad is a little bit like like direct mail in the sense. It's just interruption marketing. We're trying to interrupt people as they go about their business. Maybe they're looking at pictures of their grandkids or something. And we're just trying to say, hey, by the way, if you've got a house problem, we can solve it, right? And so I'll try to, the other way people go, and I'll come back to Facebook in a minute, is with Google ads. Google ads are inbound in my perspective, right? Because people go to Google and they have a problem and they're trying to solve it.
They're actively looking. It's you're not placing it in front of them and hoping. They're looking for something.
They are looking. And I think, like my campaign managers tell me that there's something like, 200 to 250 keywords that we've identified after spending many, many millions of dollars in Google ads that actually are indicative of somebody who's actually got a real house problem that they're trying to solve. Like it's a true motivated seller type keyword. And of that 250, there are probably honestly only 20 or 30 that provide 80% of all the traffic out there,
So you've learned that just through the volume of experience, you've whittled that kind of knowledge down.
Yeah. I mean, we've generated tens of thousands of motivated seller leads over the past 10 years. And we have a way to aggregate all that data and look at it and learn from it. And so that's what it's based on. But the cool thing about both of those systems now, and this is Jordan, if I start to get in the weeds too much, you just have to reach across.
I'll give you a slap.
The internet and slap me. But Facebook, now, as soon as I say this, of course, they're going to change their rules next week, right? So I probably shouldn't even say anything about Facebook's policies. But I will say this. They are a pain in the rear end. Their policies constantly change. I have a guy, one of my Facebook campaign managers, who probably spends 2 or 3 hours a day doing nothing but sitting on chat with Facebook reps, trying to get disproved ads approved again, or it's maddening.
I've noticed that. Like I'll see an email coming because I don't manage that side of our business, but I get the emails because I'm part of and it'll be like, this ad has been declined or disproved. And I'm like, what could we have possibly put in there that happens? And that happens to us. So if you're managing that many, you must just constantly be dealing with it.
And the truly maddening thing is that and I mean, there are a million reasons an ad can kind of like trigger that automated warning, right? So the robots turn the ad off generally, but it takes the humans to turn them back on. And we have little scripts that we have to say in the chat, that because we finally learned the trigger words so that the humans, who quite often are verging on incompetent or disinterested, really. But if you say the right things, then you can kind of get them to put the ad back in the review process. And then eventually, almost in every case, the ad will be back online within a few hours. So it's this whole exercise of like, it's randomly disapproved. And then we have to spend time dealing with these disinterested human beings. And eventually they go, oh yeah, you're right. We'll turn the ad back on. So Facebook it's pretty annoying in that way. But the cool thing about Facebook, there are good things about Facebook. I mean, the main good thing is that you can get somebody to click an ad finally, if you can get it to run, and they can tell you like, oh yeah, I do have this house for sale. Give me an offer. And then, those things turn into deals, which turns into a lot of money, right? We had a client in St. Louis just recently who I think over the past 3 months or so has cleared like $100K in wholesale assignment fees just from this Facebook ad campaign, right? So it works. And that's why we put up with all the aggravation, because it actually works. And the leads are actually cheaper than Google leads. So that's good. And I mean, there's lots of things you can do you talked about earlier, finding the right people, right? Because with Facebook, you're not depending on them actually searching in on something. So you're
looking for them.
You're looking for them.
You're exactly. Well, and that's one of the things I wanted to kind of to sort of make clear in some ways about this. I think your point about the journey that someone may make in the marketing spend and how they approach marketing, starting with the spray and play kind of cold call element where you're essentially hitting a very large list and getting a low success rate, but it's not that expensive, and hopefully you get some deals out of it. But once you get to this sort, you are theoretically, your cost per lead would probably increase quite a bit. But the difference is, instead of buying, do you want to spend your time with 25,000 completely cold, unproven people who may not have anything to do with you or have a house to sell? Or do you want those people who have seen your ad and clicked on it and then submitted your details, where you're almost you've qualified it enough, you can start working those leads. So each lead is a potential lead to work, as opposed to the cold element. Is that how you guys see it?
Totally. That's exactly right. And it really is this thing where cost per lead is higher on Facebook than it is with text message marketing, and cost per lead is higher on Google than it is on Facebook, for a reason. It's because the quality of the lead typically is higher, and you've got more advertisers kind of jockeying for space. So yeah, it makes sense. It's it's like you get what you pay for in a way. Now, I won't say that the low cost methods don't work, because they do. They totally do, right? It's just
the spread. As you scale your business, the chances are you're going to want to have a spread of marketing activities to cover different bases. Like, I know Larry Goins, who's a good old friend of mine, and you must know Larry.
Yeah, I love Larry.
Yeah, everybody loves it. Like, if you don't love Larry,
there's something wrong.
There's something wrong with you. But Larry was on this podcast, and he talked about the fact that they still mail out 10,000 postcards per week. So but again, the spread of things, as you scale your business, you're going to want to find and assess what is working. So let's move to the assess what's working bit, because obviously you guys, it's your job to sort of hone in for each customer what's going to work for them. You can't know right away. You've got to try and kind of wiggle around. It's, because not everybody's different. How important is that kind of process of narrowing down for each customer, each market, for you guys, and what's your approach to that?
Okay, that is such a good question, because it's definitely not one size fits all. Maybe I'll just stay in my world, in my lane for a minute, and I'll leave aside the discussion about texting and cold calling. Although we do typically, if people come to us and they say like, hey, I'm so excited, I want to get started, I've got a $500 a month marketing budget, what can you do for us? Then we just very, gently and kind of this fatherly way, put our arms around them and say, okay, you need to go find yourself a good cold calling and text marketing solution, because that's where you are now in your business, right? But for other people who have maybe they're a little bit more further along, with their business, they've got a little more revenue coming in, doing more deals. So then still, if they want to get into digital marketing, what should they do? A few factors that are really important to look at are, first of all, what market are they in? Is it a market? Is it Los Angeles, or is it, Dothan, Alabama, right? Because the number of people in a market in some ways is going to determine what your options may be. The second thing you look at, and it's not the same as how big the market is how competitive the market is. Another thing you want to look at is like, how are your back office systems set up? Because like, here's one just little tidbit on that. You probably know John Martinez, the real estate sales trainer. Such a good guy, and he's been hammering this point for years and years now, which is that particularly with Google ads, someone is doing a search, they search for like sell my house fast, Athens, Georgia. They see a page of results, they pick one out. The ads are at the top, the organic results or the maps are down below, right? Whatever it is. If they click an ad, that ad at that point, or let's say it's not Athens, which is where I live, let's say it's Atlanta. The click on that ad is probably going to cost you somewhere between $40 and $60. Okay. That's not a cheap click. They're going to hit your landing page. And usually landing pages want you to do two things, either fill out a form or call. So whether they call or whether they fill out a form, and this is according to John and everything, we know from talking to so many investors, is that you either need to answer the call live or you need to call them back within about 3 minutes. Or if they fill out a form, same exact thing, right? Same exact thing. And it's speed to lead. And so we have to ask questions like that. Like, are you set up to do that? Right? Because you should not spend $1.
Because if you're going to spend $60 on getting this click, then don't waste it by calling them back a week later.
Exactly. And it's even worse than that, because typically what we see is it takes about 5 clicks to get a lead. So if it's a $30 click, then that's $150 cost per lead. If it's a $40 click, it's a $200 cost per lead. That's $200 that you really just spent to get that person to call you or fill out a form, right? And that adds up. And if you don't jump on that, right, then you can imagine what they do next. They just hit the back button and they're back at that search results page, right? And they go on to the next one. It's like in my office here yesterday, we had this emergency with the hot water heater. It kind of blew up and it was leaking from, I'm in the upstairs of the building. It was leaking down through the ceiling of the downstairs space, right? Now, if I start calling plumbers, what do I want? I want somebody to answer the damn phone right now, right? And if you don't answer the phone, I'm going to the next guy. It's just, maybe that's, it's not quite that urgent,
but the point is valid. And I have heard that over and over again from successful investors. Speed to contact is critical, because otherwise the chance of them going someone else who does get in touch with them, and then they're locked in there until they get disappointed, or until, they're not necessarily going to be like, well, I called this guy first, so I'm going to give him a shot. Like, no. This person answered, this person's talked to them, they're in that conversation until they lose it.
Exactly.
And that's a really good point in terms of, in terms of how you can approach the type of leads that we're talking about, that you guys work on these. If you're going to spend $200 to $300 on a lead and you want to generate 50 leads,
right?
If you want to generate 10 leads, you're still spending $3,000.
Exactly.
So good Lord, do not let that sit on the table and go, oh, well, yeah, I forgot to call this back for 2 days.
Exactly. And you would be surprised at how often that happens. And
I wouldn't.
Okay, you wouldn't.
I used to build CRMs for people. Don't forget. I know exactly how terrible most people approach it. But if you think about it in dollars and cents, and you think about it in terms of marketing spend, it's also like, why are you spending? Why are you buying the Ferrari if you've got speed bumps all over your road? You just don't get the tool. If you're going to invest in quality tools, and for me, anytime someone presses a button to come to see me, when someone's actively making a choice to reach out to me via a form or a phone, that is the top of the level of things that I care about, because right. I'm not reaching out to them and hoping they've got something. They are calling me back. They are messaging me. You got to treat them seriously. And I think it's interesting that you guys make that a really important part of the conversation when you're setting it up. How much does each market, like you talked a bit about kind of the market size, the competitive landscape and all that.
Right.
What about, this is a question because I may be completely wrong, but do things like demographics matter as well for markets in terms of what you may, where you may, demographics and housing kind of price, types of housing, whether they're middle ground, lower ground, upper ground, on all those, how much do you get into the weeds of the very specifics, or is it much more higher level in terms of volume?
Okay, so every investor kind of has a buy box, right? And the buy box is partly determined by geography, but yeah, you're right. It's also partly determined by demographics. So if you're in Birmingham, Alabama, for example, your buy box may be, you really like, like a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house built in the 1950s that needs a lot of work, right? Because, you can buy that house even today for, let's just say 70, 80, 90, 120, and do what you do to it. And then you put a renter into it, or flip it as a wholesale deal, or fix it up and sell it, right? That's your buy box. Someone out on the West Coast, for example, has a very, very different buy box potentially, right? Like we have a client in the Bay Area, and they are actually okay. They know that house that may be selling for $650,000 is a great deal at $650,000, right? Because if they put 200 in it, then it's worth $1.5 million. So yeah, you do kind of like, so the investors, most people are not like that, to be clear, right? That's an unusual thing. Most people, like the bread and butter of real estate investing around the country still is you buy these houses that are like 3-2 or even a little smaller, and they're decades old, and they typically need repairs. There's some things wrong with them. There's some reasons why people can't sell them just on the open market, right? As to a retail buyer. That tends to be the sweet spot. So the demographics that go along with that are typically that's quite often an older person that lives in that house, that they've been there a while, right? Or sometimes the demographics might just be something like you've got like in every city, you've got little pockets, right? Where there are these working class pockets, but maybe out in the suburbs, you've got the more like the high income professional areas. And you kind of have to there are some ways, without getting into the details of it, to focus in on those geographic areas that are associated with the demographics, right? That's the key point. So it's not so much geography. It's like, you don't want to go for places above 500 feet in elevation. Like that doesn't matter. That geography is irrelevant. It's like, where do the working class people live? Because they typically, those are quite often usually just the best opportunities for investors. But like the guy in the Bay Area shows you, it doesn't have to be that way. But you can target geography pretty carefully, particularly with Google Ads. And there's some things you can do too with data. So I think our friend Chris Richter, right, from Audantic. He's really good at pulling lists of people who are likely to sell. And he operates within what he knows his clients' buy boxes are as well, right? So he can pull that list, and it may be like, let's say it's back to Birmingham. It may be all across the city, but it's specific properties. There are some things you can do to actually just put ads in front of those particular people associated with those properties. And that's probably too complex of a discussion to get into today, like how to do that. But that's great if you can do that. And the point is, though, at the end of the day, like you've got to try to make your ad spend be as efficient as possible. So you're not showing ads to people who either own these, like in Birmingham, there are $1 million homes in Birmingham, right? But you probably don't want to buy that. And you don't want to advertise to those kinds of people. So putting your ads in front of the right people, whether it's driven by geography or some kind of custom data set that you can import and then use as a filtering tool for your ads, something like that makes it more efficient.
Now, you talked a little earlier about kind of, someone comes in, they says, I've got a $500 a month spend I can do. And the likelihood of gently pushing them towards the sort of lower cost entry points of cold calling, etc. I'm gonna ignore the cold texting bit because the TCPA regulations around cold texting. Anybody listening to this, don't get me started on that. It's a very fast slope towards lawsuit around that. But certainly there's if you look at cold calling, there are times and places, there are regulations involved, but you can still do it within the confines of the regulations, and it can work really well. But if you were looking to up your game in terms of, where you start to go, it's great and all slogging through 25,000 leads to get the 20 cherry picked ones that I finally get. But it would be much better if I didn't have to slog through 25,000 and I could get better leads. And they start to think about the type of inbound lead gen that you guys can do. What, can you give a rough ballpark? I'm not holding this to you, you do this, because I'd imagine markets will determine spend as well based on, there'll be more competitive markets where the cost goes up, and there'll be lower the less competitive markets where the cost goes down. But are we looking at, you gotta be sitting there with a $1,500 a month budget, what's the sort of entryway to that step up as a general rule without being, I'm not holding you to this.
Yeah, I got you. Can I just plug one of your particular tools though? Like you mentioned the whole cold calling approach, which is fantastic. And Smart Dialer, which is one of your products, is superb. And so I just want to give it a plug, if I may. Yes.
I'll take all plugs, man.
So anyone who hears this and is in need or interested in, a tool that's excellent for cold calling, follow up with Jordan and ask about Smart Dialer. But okay, back to the budget question. I would say that Google is pretty expensive. I mean, and it's that way for a reason. Like I said, the quality is that high. I'd say to get into a Google campaign, if you have a market of any significant size, you're going to be spending, probably a minimum of about 2,500 in ads. That's about where it starts, because we could do the math on it. But basically, like your Google and Facebook to a large extent is all about having this month be better than last month, right? Optimizing the campaign based on a bunch of different factors. If you can't ever do that, I mean, I'll just say this. There are people I know around the country, and if you go to Bigger Pockets forums and start reading like about do-it-yourself PPC, there are definitely some people who are having success in their small market, and they're spending maybe $500 or $1,000 a month doing PPC, and they don't get many leads, but they get a few leads. And they're probably hungry, and they're probably answering live, and they're following up quickly. But to hire a company like ours, it doesn't make sense unless you're spending enough money to generate enough data to make us earn our, what you're paying us, right? Because my guys have been doing this collectively for decades, but we have to have data coming in to be able to know how to optimize the campaign and make it better over time. And if you can't spend at least that much, you're probably not bringing in enough data to warrant having us around,
And the ROI I've always said, the ROI on the type of activity, the inbound leads that you guys can generate, is really, really high, because presuming you don't drop the ball, right? The bit you can't control, particularly you guys, is you can't control once the lead comes in, that the investor and the investor's team is actually dealing with the lead properly. You can't control that bit, and that's unfortunately probably sometimes an area that hurts you, because like anybody who's ever dealt with who's ever been in that kind of scenario, if the customer's not doing their job, well, there's only so much I can do. But the ROI for people who do actually follow up properly and have a defined sales process or have a team that's working, if you can generate, let's just take if you can generate 10 leads, 10 really qualified leads, I'll just say a month at this point, although I think I've seen people generate tons, and you can close 2 of them, let's say, because you're a decent salesperson, understand how it works. If you're just doing wholesaling, chances are the $4,000 you spend on marketing is turning into $40,000 to $60,000 of assignment fees.
Yeah.
So what are we talking about here? Like, you've gotta at some level, if you're serious about scaling or building a proper business in this, you've got to look at your marketing spend as investment into profit.
Exactly. It's not a cost, it's an investment.
Yeah. You've got to look at it like that. And otherwise, if you're not, I get it. If you're so small that $5,000 a month or whatever, if you're not in a position to afford that, I totally get that. Look at the options you can do to get enough money in to do it properly.
It's exactly right. I mean, it is really an ROI framework that makes the most sense, particularly with Google ads, which are more expensive. But Jordan, I will tell you, Facebook ads can be like a way to kind of put your toes in the water a little bit with paid ads, because you can actually generate leads for, I mean, it depends. Like, I don't want to say that too many times, but it does depend on the market. It depends on how strong your organic social presence is too, because the stronger that is, the stronger, let's just call it your brand presence in a market, then the less hard the paid ads have to work, I think is a good way to phrase that. But anyway, the point is you can actually get in the game with Facebook ads for closer to around $1,000 a month in spend, right? So that can be encouraging sometimes for people as a way to start. It's just like we've already covered, you know, your quality is generally going to be lower than Google ads, and you're going to have to, you know, filter through a lot more junk. But in the midst of all that junk, you'll definitely, you know, you'll find some gems in there.
Get some deals, get some money, and then start investing in better marketing.
Exactly.
All right, Scott, it's come to that time where we're going to hit the That Real Estate Tech Guy Fast 5 questions. I ask everybody the same ones. All the technology partners, of which you are one, get the same questions. All the investors get the same questions, just slightly different ones. So I'm going to answer them relatively rapid questions, relatively rapid answers. Question number 1, what feature, I suppose for you it's a little different because you do all sorts of different ones, the types of lead gen, but what kind of, if you had to name one type of lead gen that has the biggest, that can have the biggest impact, are you able to do that, or is it too specific to the customer?
I'm going to twist your question a little bit. May I?
Twist away.
Okay. So I'd say that the biggest technique or system you can have is really between your ears. And you've got to do exactly what you were just saying to do a minute ago. You've got to start looking, if you're going to step into the world of paid ads, you have to have the mindset that, first of all, you know, you really need to say, like, I'm going to give this a 6-month commitment, right? I'm going to have that approach. This is not like, okay, I've got,
I'll try it for 5 days, and then if it doesn't work perfectly.
Right. So just commit to it, because there is a sales cycle to everything, and you won't really know your ROI numbers till after about 6 months or something like that. So it's like a mindset. It's a brain system, and you just got to commit to stay with it. And you've got to use that ROI framework, right? Don't just know that it's not just spending money. You are investing money, generating marketing that's going to pay off.
I like that twist. I'll take it.
All right.
I'll take the twist. Question number 2. And this one I think you can answer, because I think it's relevant. I think it's probably going to be a variation of what you just said, but what's the biggest mistake people make when they start approaching paid advertising?
I could flip the answer and say they're too impatient, they don't give it long enough, or they're just nervous about committing. Like, sometimes if you can take a Google campaign from spending $3,000 or $4,000 a month to $5,000 or $6,000 a month, then all of a sudden you get 2.5 times more leads, right? Like, there's the people who are willing to invest in Google really like reap the benefits of it, for example. But I would also go back to what we talked about earlier with, like, if you're going to invest in paid ads in particular, you have to have a rock solid back office system. And that's where people drop the ball, probably as often as anything. And if I could throw in one bonus answer, you don't have enough disposition options. If you're only a wholesaler, that's all you can do, then what happens if you get this perfect flip opportunity? Or what happens if you get a house that's actually ready to be listed on the MLS today, get it under contract, get a relationship with an agent, and work out a deal, right? Pass that house on to somebody. Or maybe it's a house that you could pick up and use as a rental. Like, just have multiple disposition options. And that really gives you, that that can do wonders to your return on the marketing investment, because now you've got more ways to make money.
Well, and I'm going to guess, and you're going to be a real weird case for me in this podcast in terms of the fast 5 questions, because really, well, because yours is a relatively, if I'm talking to a company that builds CRMs, we've got a very defined use case. You got a much broader thing. So question number 3, actually, I think you've answered with questions 1 and 2, and so which is about the best advice you would have on someone new into getting into paid advertising. What you've just said, like, you've got 3 best advices there that I would 100% agree with, and particularly around, interesting around the dispo kind of side of things. I actually have been, I've been thinking more and more deeply lately around the misconception that people have around how important lead gen is versus buyer gen, because if you're only concentrating on lead gen but you've got nowhere to flog your leads, you're spending lots of money and you're not going to be able to make any cash. Buyers are critical.
That is such a good point, Jordan. Such a good point. Yeah. And that's a completely that's what I would call a campaign, right? I mean, and there are lots of ways to build your buyers list. Lots of ways to build a buyers list. But yeah, oh my gosh, I'm so glad you brought it up, because you got to give that really as much attention as you give the leads. Yeah.
Otherwise, where are you putting them? Right. You've got 50 leads that you put under contract. Right. Can you close any of them?
Exactly.
And if you can't close any of them, you're not making any money.
So I'll drop this just as like a reference point. So we work with a guy named Jimmy Vreeland in St. Louis, Missouri, on his social media, and we do paid ads for Jimmy too. But I'm talking now about organic social media. So which people really like, because it takes time as opposed to money, right? So for some people, that's a good situation. Go check out what we're doing for Jimmy. His buyer's brand is called You Buy STL. And I think we're using a lot of video, we're using a lot of rich content, and we're really like making a full press effort to attract all the other investors in the St. Louis area. And it's working out really well now, because the more buyers you have, probably the higher the assignment fees you're going to get. You got people bidding,
or the higher you can offer as well. If you've got better buyers, then you can win more deals, because you got the confidence to offer more money.
Great point. Great point.
And otherwise, do you want to sniff at the bottom the whole time, or do you want to know, I've got these buyers who really like these properties, and if I can get one, I know I can make more money, so I can get that property by offering more.
So true. Great point. Yeah, it makes everything in the business go better. Yeah.
100%. All right. Question number 4. What is one thing you wish everyone knew about paid advertising?
One thing. I would say probably that paid ads are a marketing strategy, or they're marketing channels that you should not be afraid of. You should not be afraid of them. You shouldn't be intimidated by them, because if you've ever logged into Google in particular, if you've logged into like the ad manager, it's
oh my God.
Whoa, oh my God, get me out of here, right? But what I will tell you is that like companies like mine are not crazy expensive to begin with, but there are also lots of great resources out there. Like if you go to BiggerPockets or some other places, start small. Like even if you want to do it yourself, do not be afraid. Do not be intimidated by these ads dashboard, these consoles that look so crazy. And even Facebook. I mean, Facebook used to be simpler. It's not that simple anymore. But don't be intimidated. Like if you want to just play around, give yourself $500 to play around and just see how it works. So that's my main thing. Just don't be afraid of it, because if you can get comfortable with it as an ad channel, you can. It's unique in what it allows you to do with reaching more people.
Fantastic. Last question. Someone's just starting out, brand new investor, or they're just getting started. Your best advice to how to start the journey into lead gen. And they're just starting out. I think we touched a bit about the journey earlier in the podcast. Just clarify, just crystallize it. If you were just starting out and you had to pick 3 things to start looking at, what would you look at?
Okay, just starting out. So,
and I'm taking cold texting off the menu because I will not be part of that.
All right. Well, I suspect some people are out there going, well, I made a lot of money from it last month, Jordan. But yeah, they better save that money for attorney's fees, right? No, I mean, I'm actually not as doctrinaire about it as you are. I think it can be legal in certain situations, but let's not go there. What I would tell people just starting out is, start with the free or the cheap stuff, right? And really use it. So for example, I mentioned like the You Buy STL that my friend Jimmy Vreeling does in St. Louis. He's also got his organic socials for that are kind of seller facing. It's called I Buy STL. So he's really focusing on organic social media for both those 2 markets, right? He creates video. He's posting every single day, pretty much. He's clear about how he helps each of those groups, and he's putting the message out. In other words, he's getting himself out there. And use the free platforms, get comfortable with video. That's almost like point number 2. Get comfortable with video. We haven't talked about TikTok yet, and it's in some ways the demographics don't
Podcast
match.
Podcast number 2. You come back on.
Okay, I will. I mean, but like TikTok may seem like something that teenagers use, but I guarantee, like if we're circle back around like at the end of 2023, the people who got into TikTok earlier are going to be really glad they did. But the main thing is YouTube Shorts, Instagram Reels, TikTok. I mean, the world is going video all the way. You've got to get comfortable with it in some way. And, so I'm not really telling you how to do that, but there are ways to get comfortable with video. But mostly it's like, you got to start with the place of who am I and how do I help people? And who do I help? And what can I say to those people? And then just get comfortable being that person and showing up and getting the message out there. So that's probably one thing. And the other thing is embrace a philosophy of failing forward. That is just absolutely critical. It's really true with paid ads. Because like a great success is if we run an ad, like on a Facebook ad or something, and it just bombs. It's like, yes, that's so great. Now we know what not to do. And now we can pivot and try something else, right? Embrace that philosophy. Like failure is just part of the learning process. Everybody who's successful has a long history of failures behind them, right? It's just how you respond to the failures, because you're going to fail, guaranteed. Embrace it, say, excellent. Now I know that and I won't do that again. What's the next experiment I can make, right? So, I mean, that's my main thing. And then of course, answer your phones when somebody calls you.
Or if they've submitted a lead, call them.
Yeah.
Call them quick.
Yeah, you might want to do something about that.
Absolutely. Well, this is Scott. It's been an absolute pleasure to catch back up with you and to learn a bit more. I mean, we touched on a number of things past just the paid advertising that I think are really valuable as just part of the marketing and growth mix that goes into scaling a business. As a final kind of part of today's podcast, I mean, how can people find you? How, people listen to this who are like, man, I got up my game. How can they find you? Let everyone know.
Well, you can go to our website, lightmarkmedia.com, LIGHT MARK media.com. And there's even a way to get on the phone with us if you want to talk more about any of these topics. Just go to, I think it's the button that's all over the website. I forget what it says, but fill out a form, get on the phone. I've got some really good campaign managers who are happy to talk through, any of these marketing channels. They love, that's what their passion is. So yeah, the website's probably the best thing.
Awesome. Well, we'll be dropping the website address into the podcast page on the website. Also, of course, there'll be links to Lightmark Media on the technology store part of the website as well. Please, if you listen to this, do the things you're supposed to do with podcasts and subscribe, like, review. It does help push this topic up of real estate technology, which is a critical part of scaling your real estate business. And, if you really want to scale a business, technology is going to be a huge part of the process of doing it. So do please support the podcast by liking and subscribing and doing all that stuff. Scott, thank you so much, man. I will speak to you very soon.
Thank you, Jordan. Take care.
Thanks for listening to another amazing episode of That Real Estate Tech Guy. Head over to thatrealeestatetechguy.com to check out all episodes and get special discounts on tons of awesome real estate technology platforms.